So to continue with the adrenal gland, it is innervated by the autonomic nervous system. Where's my cursor? There we go. And the production, the stimulation from the sympathetic division will cause the secretion of epinephrine, also called adrenaline, and norepinephrine, also called noradrenaline, by what are called the chromaffin cells. And those are cells within the adrenal medulla. And then we covered this in the autonomic nervous system chapter. So not necessarily essential for life the way that the adrenal cortex is, but secretion occurs in emergencies or perceived emergency type situations that hold fight or flight response. Again, covered in the autonomic nervous system chapter. Endocrine function of the kidneys. So the kidneys release a hormone referred to as erythropoietin, EPO, in response to low oxygen levels in the blood. So what the EPO does, erythropoietin, it increases red blood cell production in the red bone marrow of our bones, from in the epiphyses of our long bones. So increased red blood cell production, more red blood cells in the blood, higher oxygen carrying capacity. That should lead to increased oxygen levels, hopefully getting things back up to homeostatic levels of blood oxygen. Once that happens, the stimulus to secrete erythropoietin by the kidneys is shut down, and you no longer have excess red blood cell production. So things are back up to homeostatic levels. The pancreas, a mixed organ, posterior to the stomach, so the stomach will kind of sit right above it here. It's a mixed gland, a mixed organ in the sense that it has both endocrine and digestive system functions. Mostly digestive system exocrine gland. That means digestive enzymes are produced by cells in clusters called acini. We'll cover this when we do the digestive system. And those digestive enzymes are transferred to the small intestine via ducts, hence exocrine gland secretion method. And most of the pancreas operates in terms of digestive system, but a small percentage of it, so about 1%, is endocrine. So mostly the pancreas is involved in producing digestive juices, enzymes that break down our foodstuffs that we digest in our small intestine. That's a portion of the small intestine called the duodenum. And again, we'll talk about that digestive system. The endocrine gland function of the pancreas is only about 1 to 2% of the pancreatic cells. And the cells are grouped into little clusters called pancreatic islets. There's one here. Or the islets of Langerhans. Only about 1 to 2% of the pancreas is endocrine gland tissue. So the two main endocrine cells in the pancreatic islets are alpha cells, that's the Greek letter alpha, and they secrete a hormone called glucagon. So alpha-gluca, all right? Alpha cells produce glucagon. Glucagon is secreted by the alpha cells in the pancreatic islets when, blood glucose levels have dropped or low, right, below normal homeostatic blood glucose levels. Another way to think about it is all the glucose is gone, okay? So the effect of glucagon is to stimulate glycogen breakdown. Glycogen is a storage polysaccharide made up of glucose monosaccharides. So glycogen is broken down, released into the bloodstream from liver, muscle cells, adipose tissue as well. And then that means more glucose into the bloodstream and hopefully fixing this imbalance and getting the blood glucose levels back up to homeostatic levels. So like if you don't eat for a long time, your blood glucose levels will drop. Okay? Hopefully that pushes that back up to normal homeostatic levels. That shuts off the stimulus to produce glucagon by the alpha cells within the pancreatic islets. Blood glucose levels should return back to normal. Alpha for gluca. Right? Alpha cells producing glucagon. The other cells in the pancreatic islets are called beta cells, Greek beta, B. They secrete insulin, which I'm sure you've heard of. So insulin is secreted in response to elevated blood glucose levels, okay? So normal homeostatic blood glucose levels, you have a huge meal, you drink down a thirsty 2-ouncer of soda, blood glucose levels rise above normal, above homeostatic conditions, homeostatic levels. That stimulates the beta cells to release insulin into the bloodstream. Insulin's effects on the body are the liver will remove glucose, excess glucose from the bloodstream, store it as glycogen. Same things with the muscle cells. And adipose tissue will convert glucose into the lipid stored in the epidocyte cells, right? Fat. All that causes decreases in blood glucose levels and hopefully fix this imbalance and bring glucose levels back to normal homeostatic blood levels. Right? So opposite effects of glucagon. So insulin and glucagon have opposing effects. Okay, endocrine tissue is related to the reproductive system. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. Male gonad, testis. There are cells called interstitial cells that produce male hormones, androgens, like testosterone. So what this thing here is a little section of one of these coiled seminiferous tubules that produces sperm cells. But surrounding it, see the little IC here? These are interstitial cells, cells that are not part of the sperm-producing seminiferous tubules. So these interstitial cells found within the testis produce androgens like testosterone, right? And that helps prod along sperm production by the seminiferous tubules and produces the secondary sexual characteristics in males. These things that become pronounced at puberty, right? The facial hair, deepening the voice, increased musculature, those sorts of things. And muscle growth as well. Okay. On the female side, the ovary, or the ovaries, or the female gonads that are producing the female gamete, an egg or an ovum or an oocyte that gets ovulated out at ovulation, and also hormones. So the follicular cells produce a hormone called hormones called estrogens, for example, estradiol. So here in yellow is a developing egg or oocyte. It develops in a multicellular structure called a follicle. So these are ovarian follicles. And at ovulation, the mature follicle ruptures and ejects the egg or oocyte. And then that works its way through the uterine or fallopian tube towards the uterus. But the cells of the follicle, the follicular cells, are producing these female hormones, estrogens like estradiol. And they're important in the maturation of the oocytes and the follicles. And we'll get into more detail on this with the reproductive system chapter later on. And after ovulation, what gets ejected is the oocyte and some surrounding follicular cells. But the majority of the follicle cells are retained within the ovary, and they transition into a structure called the corpus luteum. That's after ovulation. So the corpus luteum is producing its own hormones called progesterone, and that's important in the reproductive cycle in females in the sense of maintaining the uterine lining for possible implantation of an egg if it gets fertilized by sperm, and that would work its way now a developing blastula, a little pre-embryo that may be ready for implantation in the uterine wall, if that was to occur. So it prepares the uterus for implantation of a fertilized egg. Again, we'll get into more details on this when we do the reproductive system. Pineal gland. There's the brain mid-sagittal section. That is the diencephalon. That little part there is where the thalamus is, hypothalamus, and then the epithalamus where the pineal gland is located. Pineal gland produces melatonin, And melatonin is important in regulating our normal night and day cycles, or sleep and wake cycles, our circadian rhythm. So it helps regulate that rhythm in the 24-hour wake-sleep cycle that we normally have. And that's why we kind of start to feel drowsy and sleepy when we go to bed, and why we're able to arouse and awake when we wake up in the morning, because of the cycling concentration levels of melatonin produced by the pineal gland in the body. Okay? And that's it.